Hello and welcome to the Strong Suit Podcast, where we focus on the people part of your business. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I have a world-class expert on talent and recruiting so that you can build a company filled with rock stars. And I have bagged the elephant today, ladies and gentlemen, a legend in San Francisco, a legend in Silicon Valley, investor in over 70 technology companies, CEO of SafeGraph, Auren Hoffman. Auren is the former CEO of LiveRamp, one of the fastest growing software companies, a middleware company that would basically plug marketing applications together. That was acquired by Acxiom in 2014. And prior to that, he started a bunch of other companies. Serial entrepreneur, the term was invented for Auren Hoffman. I was fortunate enough to meet Auren during one of his very first early stage companies, 15, almost 20 years ago. Somehow I got older and he did not. He's preserved in time. And I'm thrilled to have you. How are you, Auren?
I'm great. Great to talk with you, Jeff.
I'm really excited. So we met way back in the day, 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And you were in the people business, in kind of the recruiting business. Since then, your career has taken different turns in technology, but obviously people has always been a key part of it.
Absolutely.
And so it just seemed to me that you'd be an amazing guest. So we appreciate you making 20 minutes for us today.
Really happy to be here.
Tell us, just start with, in 60 seconds, if you had to write what you've learned about hiring great people and building great teams, no matter what the company or industry is, what would it be? What is the key?
Well, I think first, the most important thing I think to think about is should you recruit? And I think most companies recruit before they need to. And most companies probably have anywhere between 2x and 10x more people than they need to have. So
is that driven by ego, or is that driven by they just haven't stopped to think, what do we need?
I think it's the latter. So I think most companies could actually have way fewer people and still accomplish the same thing. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to spend less money.
Yeah.
Because way fewer people means you're going to have to spend a lot more on technology, on vendors, on outsourcing, on a whole bunch of other types of things.
Right.
But I think the first thing that you should do as a company is spend as much time as possible figuring out how you should not hire. I think most companies just spend so much time figuring out that they to hire and interviewing and all these other types of things. And of course, the bigger you are, the more communication problems you have. So
it grows exponentially.
Exactly. I mean, might not be exponentially, but maybe the best run company in the world has n/2 communication problem. You're definitely right. The worst run company is maybe n² communication problem.
Yeah.
But even n/2 is bad.
Right.
And so if you can do things to reduce your n, do things to reduce the number of people or to slow the growth, I think you should do those things.
And you will likely be more profitable as a business, at least over time.
Yeah, it really depends. So, but if you think of, there are many different businesses that have done this really well. Probably the company that's done this the best is Instagram. Mm-hmm. Before they got acquired, they had 16 people, and they were able to use vendors to be able to accomplish all these amazing things. WhatsApp, same thing. So yep. WhatsApp had people at time of acquisition. It was the highest market cap per person ever.
Right.
Vizio got to $2 billion in revenue with just 80 people.
Mm-hmm.
So just, coordinating a whole bunch of different types of vendors. Kylie Jenner's company has, I think, 8 employees, billion, yep. Over like $1 billion in revenue.
That's a cosmetics company?
Cosmetics company. Yeah. I mean, just run.
So this is not just software companies or tech companies we're talking about.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So measure twice, cut once, right? Measure twice, hire once, I guess you're saying, is figure out any way to avoid hiring people.
Yeah, so use vendors, use APIs, use outsource things, do whatever. There's lots of different things that you can do, and especially if it's not core to what your business is, it's hard to know. So for Vizio, what is their core? Manufacturing core? Turns out not. Even marketing turned out not to be in the core. So they're able to have a lot of other people do these types of things. It doesn't mean that their costs are lower. In fact, sometimes your costs are actually higher,
Yeah.
When Twilio went public, they had to announce that WhatsApp was their biggest customer. WhatsApp was spending over $28 million a year on Twilio.
Yeah.
They could have taken that in-house. They could have actually redone it. But what they realize is having fewer people allowed them to coordinate better. That allows them to move faster. And there's just so many great things that happen when you can coordinate quicker.
What led you to that conclusion? Was there something that happened in your career where that light bulb went on, or you've just kind of come to that conclusion?
It's more of an evolution than a revolution. So just slowly seeing these things and just how much of your time, if you think of the average CEO is just spending so much of their time recruiting.
Yeah.
And then that means they're not spending that time thinking strategically or selling or all the other types of things. And then if you think of like engineer, like sometimes there are some organizations where engineers are spending a third of their time recruiting. Yeah. And not being able to. So imagine if you had that third of the time back for all those.
To actually just run the business, right?
Exactly. And so recruiting's hard and it's becoming very complicated. And then the good news is the field that has the most leverage, where you can most use vendors, is software engineering.
Yeah. So
it's the ones with the most tools available, et cetera. And that is the field where it is the hardest to recruit. So it's the perfect match.
To hire as few of them as you need.
Yeah, hire the best ones, and then
pay
allow
extra
them
if you have to.
Great tools. Yeah, pay them more, hire the best ones, and have them use all the tools, and then rather than have them spend time recruiting, they could spend time building really, really cool things.
So when you do have to recruit, look, you're in the middle of San Francisco. You're in the city, right? Not the valley?
Yeah, in San Francisco.
But even if you were in the valley, it's an all-out war for talent.
Yep.
Worse than we've probably ever seen before. When you do have to recruit, and assuming you can't pay more than everybody, because it's hard to be the top paying company, what is working these days? What have you found makes the difference between that amazing developer or just any candidate saying yes versus saying no?
Well, you have to have something asymmetric that works in your company that is really appealing to them. So either they're going to be working on something in your company that is going to be different than they would get to work on somewhere else.
Yep. So the challenge itself.
Yeah, there's a challenge. Or if you work in a big company like a Google or Facebook, even though those are great companies, you might not be able to do as many things, or you might be able to not be innovative to innovate as quickly. But one of the things you can tell people is if you actually focus on not having a lot of people in your company, is you can tell people, look, you're only going to be working on the hardest things. You're never going to be working on things easy to do, because anytime we identify something that's relatively easy to do, we're going to use technology for that. We're going to outsource that. Yep. We're going to use somebody else. So you're only going to be working on the most difficult problems that we can't figure out any other way to solve. Because if there's any possibility that we could figure out a way to solve it externally, we will.
We would have already.
That's right. Or you're going to help. And one of the things you're going to help us solve is how to help solve those problems externally, which is always a hard problem. So how do you not do something is always really, really hard to figure out.
So I think what you're saying then is the best talent is drawn to these big, meaty challenges. You're going to work on not necessarily the coolest stuff, but the hardest stuff. And that repels B and C players, but attracts A players. Am I getting that right or no?
Yeah, the best people in the world want to work on things that have a very high likelihood of failure. And maybe the high likelihood is not 90%, but it's got to be over 30% of failure for them to be interested in it. There should be a high rate of it should be really hard to do, and they should learn a lot by doing it.
Got it. And these are not just software developers, but any role.
Any role.
So it's another advantage to what you're talking about in terms of outsourcing anything not core, is you're going to have trouble attracting A players if they're working on basic redundant stuff. Like who's going to come do that job?
I think if you're at a company today, you should think of yourself as a capital allocator. So you should be Warren Buffett.
Yep.
And you have company's capital, and your goal is to invest that capital for a good return. And not all of your investments are going to pay off, just like any investor. But but your goal is to invest in a way. And sometimes you can invest it in a tool to make you more efficient. Sometimes you can invest it in some sort of process to make your team better. Sometimes there's an opportunity to make the entire company better. But you should be constantly going out. And the big problem is there's 5,000 books about how to hire people and how to grow talent, and you have a great podcast on it, and there's all these amazing different opportunities, and there's a gazillion MBA courses on it.
But it should be your last choice.
It should be the last thing. There are almost no books on how to hire and how to manage vendors, how to grow vendors, how to select vendors. There's some procurement things about how to beat up your vendors, but that's not what this is about.
Sure.
Like figuring out what the vendors to use and how do you string them together to create a solution. This is a really, really hard problem, and there's very little literature on that today.
Yep. It's kind of how to build an ecosystem around your company so that you can focus on just the 7 of you who act like 70 people, like a magnifying lens.
Yeah, and sometimes the 7 of you can act as 7,000 people.
Yeah, that's even better. Let's talk about some of the big mistakes you've made along the way. You don't have to name names, but when you think that you've hired hundreds, thousands of people over the years?
Yeah.
So, and I'm sure you've parted ways with people. When you trace back to the mistakes you've made, hiring mistakes, recruiting mistakes, or even job design mistakes, what are some of that come to mind that really were, the light bulb went on for you?
I think one thing that I make a lot of mistakes in, and I think is that unbalanced teams beat balanced teams. And I think most companies, they'll realize, okay, we're bad at marketing. We're really good at engineering, but we're bad at marketing. So they go try to fill the gap and hire somebody to help them do marketing well.
Yep.
The problem is if they're really good at engineering, they're probably really good at hiring engineers.
Probably.
And they know how to do that, and they already have good engineers, and they already have a process for it. If they're bad at marketing, the chance that they're going to hire someone who's good at marketing is actually quite low.
So they're trying to make up for their weaknesses as opposed to playing to their strengths.
Exactly. So they just spend all their time making weaknesses, and it's really hard to weaknesses because they don't even know how to do it. And so they don't actually do it really well. And it turns out almost all the best companies are really lopsided. They're really good at somewhere between 1 to 3 things, and they're actually quite bad at everything else. So if you think of Salesforce.com, which is one of my favorite companies, I love Salesforce. They're an incredible company.
Yep.
Okay, what are they good at? They're amazing at marketing. They're probably the best B2B marketing company in history. Okay, why are they amazing at marketing? Well, the CEO is one of the best marketers in history.
Sure. It's in the DNA of the company.
That is what he did before he joined Salesforce. He did marketing.
Yep.
He's amazing at marketing. Are they good at UI? Well, anyone who's ever used Salesforce knows they're terrible at UI.
Yeah.
Right?
They're at least okay, but that's about it.
No, they're not okay. They're like the worst. They're one of the worst UI companies in history.
Right.
That's
that holding them back, right?
Yeah, they're so bad. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like you just go through all the things that they're terrible at. They're terrible at so many things, but they're great at a small number of things, and they have great people at those things.
So play to your strengths and screw the rest. How have you learned that works? Because it would seem like you need to be at least good enough in each functional area, right? Are you saying that you develop the best product and you win? You don't even need great sales and marketing, just the world beats the pass through your door? That seems contrary to what I have been told for so many years.
You figure out the areas of strength, and you continue to play to those strengths. So maybe your strength is engineering people, and maybe the engineering people build marketing into the engineering products.
Oh, that's interesting. Right? Yeah.
Or maybe you're really great at sales and not marketing, and you figure out how to overcome that with sales. Or there's lots of organizations that have really interesting, or you're really good at BD and not sales, and then you do everything through a channel.
Got it.
Or, so there's all these different types of things that you do, and so you run your strategy of your company based on the strengths of this. Again, you're probably great at 1 to 3 areas.
Yeah.
So you shouldn't run the strategy of your company in areas where you're not great at.
Yeah. It should be like you said, Warren Buffett, like concentrated bets as opposed to a laundry list.
That's right. Have a small number of concentrated bets. And then remember, if you are really good at something, you're likely going to be very good at hiring for that thing. If you're not good at something, you likely are not going to be good at hiring for that
Right.
thing.
So why bother?
Yeah. I mean, if you want to try, you're going to be a lot less successful. So it's going to take longer, and generally I think strengths beat weaknesses.
Yeah.
So focusing more and more on strengths, getting really, really good at those things. And in the end, like if people want to buy a product, they usually are buying it for the strengths. There's a small number of things this product is really great at. There might be gazillion problems with it,
but I'm buying it for those 3 things.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yep. And know what your customers need on those 3 things and be the best at them.
That's right.
What else have you learned? Other mistakes that come to mind of hires that you've made along the way? Let's maybe shift from software developers to other types of people you've hired. Salespeople, maybe that's a good place to go, or marketers.
I think there are certain categories of professionals where the number of really talented people as a percentage of the people who work in those categories is very low.
Mm-hmm.
So so it becomes very, very hard to hire in those categories. So the flip side is, let's say you want to hire a software engineer, and let's say the average software engineer that works at Google is probably very good. So
because of all the work that Google has done to
they've done an amazing job,
pre-screen them.
And they're an incredible company, et cetera. So if you just threw darts and hired an average software engineer at Google and didn't do anything else, you might actually end up with some good people. So you know, at least you know where to go fish for a good pool. Maybe there's bad ones there and good ones, and you still have to do a lot of other things to figure out the good ones coming out of Google, but at least you know where to fish. You fish in Google. In other disciplines, like for instance, marketing, there are many great marketing people, but there, as a percentage of all the people working in marketing, it's actually quite low. Like in let's say, probably 90% of people in marketing are in the bottom third of their organization. And so even at a great company like Google, I'm sure there's some amazing marketing people at Google, but the average person in marketing at Google is probably not very good. And therefore, it's a much more difficult place to hire from.
But if your logic translates, why wouldn't you go to Procter & Gamble or some other marketing academy company?
Even in those places, the average person in marketing is not very good.
Got it. So it's not so much the company, it's just
a place that it's an easy place to hide.
Got it.
It's harder to hide in sales. And so you weed out people pretty quickly. Product is probably the hardest place in an organization to hide from because everyone you're touching. But if you're at the edge somewhere, it's a lot easier to hide. I think the place probably with the least talented people sometimes is HR. Which
is ironic, right?
It's ironic, yeah. So people in HR are actually really bad at managing people often. They're really bad at doing teams. They're really bad at interviewing. I mean, incredibly ironic. Now, there are some amazing HR people.
The few that you do see are game changers.
There are some incredible, there are some incredible, the person who runs HR at Facebook she's amazing. One of the most talented people in the world. So there are some amazing HR people. It's just hard to know where to fish.
Got it.
For these. So I would put off hiring unless you're amazing in those areas. Those are the 2 areas I would put off hiring for as long as possible, because it's just really hard to know even where to fish to find the good people. You don't even know where they're concentrated. And I certainly wouldn't hire like VPs in those areas for a very, very long time. And those are also areas that you might want to hire people that don't have any experience, but you just know are talented.
Right. And it's not a coincidence probably that there's a lot of turnover. Heads of marketing and heads of HR don't last very long at many companies.
So that might be true. But if you're going to hire even like a junior marketing person, you might want to just hire a software developer to do the marketing for you, or same thing with HR or whatever it might be.
Or someone from operations. Before I wrap up, I want to switch to a completely different topic, which, you're often called one of the best connected, well-connected folks in San Francisco and the Valley because you've been around a long time. You've been involved in so many companies, started so many companies, invested in how many, 70 companies or more?
Over 100 now,
100 as an angel investor. Even if our listener is not Auren and that well connected, we're all somewhat connected. How should people think about leveraging their network for hiring purposes? Most people, post and pray on a job board, which is the last thing they should do. The first thing they should do is leverage their network. But how do you do that, even if you're not as well connected perhaps as you are?
Well, I don't know that it's as important. I think in this new era that we're moving into, what you know is actually more important than who you know.
Mm-hmm.
And which I don't think was true in the 90s. I think who you knew in the 90s was more important than what you know. I think that is changing very, very quickly.
Because you can find the information if you need it, or the
Yes,
expert.
you can find information much faster today. There's more information available. There's less data silos. And so if you think of the who you knows in the 80s, those were the dominant positions. So the who you knows are the brokers, the investment bankers, the corporate lawyers.
Yep.
The what you knows would be like, let's say the hedge fund person would be more of a what you know, and the investment banker would be more the who you know.
Yep.
And recently, the what you knows have become more the dominant professions, not the who you knows. And it's just because it's a lot easier to get to people. There's a lot fewer gates, etc. So if I was, especially someone younger in my career, I'd be focusing much more on what to know rather than who to know. I'd be networking a lot less.
Just become really kick-ass at something.
Yeah, exactly. Just become world-class. Now, obviously, who you know still is important. So if you could be a what you know plus a who you know, that is certainly better.
Yep.
But if I had to pick one, I would pick the what you know over the who you know.
When you do need to hire and you go out to your network, quote unquote, have you figured out the most optimal way to do that?
Well, obviously, the best person to hire is someone that you've worked with in the past.
Because
they're
known, you know what you're getting.
You know what you're getting. You guys know you like working together. If you like working with them, they like working with you. Should be easy to recruit them and get them to. So
not necessarily friends. You're not saying friends necessarily.
No, someone you've worked with and had a good positive relationship. This you might not even know if they're married or not. I mean, you might not have never talked to them about their family.
Yeah.
But you've had a good working relationship with them, and you could communicate with them well, and that they get their stuff done, and they know they like working with you, and so for them, it cuts down on all the uncertainty. For you, it cuts down on uncertainty. So that's the best. Now, of course, there's only so many people you've worked with in the past that are great.
Yeah, you're going to tap that out.
Right. And many of them are very happy in their jobs. They don't want to leave their jobs. So it's a hard thing. But if you can do one thing, that's the way. Yep. That's what. And of course, the longer you've been in business, the more of those people you've worked with over time.
Yep.
I would keep track. I have a list of every single of those people. That these are people I hope to work with, and some of these people I end up investing in. These are also people I hope to invest with and invest in. These are fantastic people. I want to somehow be a part of my life for the rest of my life.
Yeah, again, you're thinking about asset allocation, almost, right? Where are those few bets that you want to place, and that's your list of bets that you would bet on anytime.
That's right.
Brilliant. Auren, I appreciate you making the time. Can you tell us about SafeGraph, the company you're now leading, which is in machine learning, deep learning, artificial intelligence? I'm sure I wouldn't even understand it. But in layman's terms, tell our listeners a bit about it and how they can get in touch with you.
SafeGraph is really simple. It's just data about a place. So if you want to learn about that Starbucks on 555 Main Street and want to learn about things like store hours or the shape of the Starbucks, so the geometry or some other kind of information about the place.
So physical. This is about physical places.
Physical places. So it's about real world interactions and physical places. Come to SafeGraph. We can help you do that. And then if somebody wants to learn more about me, please follow me on Twitter. It's AUREN on Twitter, or go to my blog, summation.net.
Which I subscribe to, and I can't recommend it highly enough.
Awesome.
Auren, congratulations. Keep up the phenomenal work, and thank you for sharing your wisdom with us.
Thank you, Jeff.